We all operate on this one basic assumption. Time moves forward. That's it. Yesterday's gone, tomorrow's on its way, and right now is just this fleeting moment. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the timeline we all trust so much is less like a straight road and more like a faulty recording, one that can skip, loop, and play moments completely out of order? Well, the source material we're digging into today has a fascinating and honestly a pretty unsettling answer.
And that one line right there, it just flips the whole question on its head. It suggests that the past, the present, and the future, they aren't these fixed points on a map. Nope. Instead, they're pathways in a maze that we're already lost in. A maze where any moment could just fold back on itself, repeat, or maybe even be rewritten while we're living it. Okay, so on the left, you've got the model we all know, linear time. It's that unwavering arrow, right? Predictable, reliable, always flying from past to future. But the model on the right, that suggests something way, way stranger. That's not an arrow, it's more like a tangled thread, a fractured timeline where the very fabric of reality can snag on itself, creating these loops and skips and weird little pockets of misplaced time. So you might be thinking, is this all just some cool, mind-bending theory? Well, our source presents 4 historical accounts that are really, really hard to just explain away. Think of them like case files, 4 fractures in the timeline that suggest something profound is happening just beneath the surface of our everyday lives.
All right, our first case file takes us to a quiet night in Marseille, France. A city bus driver is just finishing up his final route. The streets are empty, the city's basically asleep. Everything is perfectly, predictably normal. And then, it isn't.
So he's driving, turns a corner, he's turned 1,000 times, and his headlights flicker for just a second. When they come back on, the world is different. Buildings he's known for years are just gone, replaced by shops that shut down decades ago. He sees a bakery with a sign that hasn't been used since 1952. And then, and this is the part that is just so unnerving, he glances in his rearview mirror, and the few passengers on his bus are complete strangers, totally different from the ones who got on just minutes before. And just as suddenly as it all began, the street snaps back to normal. But here's the thing, this wasn't some dream. Shaken, the driver checks his instruments, and what he finds is just impossible. The bus's odometer, which should have been ticking forward, had actually gone backward. It showed a negative distance traveled. For a few moments, that bus hadn't just been in a different time, it had physically undone its own journey. When they asked him about it later, the driver was so clear. This wasn't that hazy, dreamlike feeling of déjà vu, that sense that you've seen this before. He called it déjà done, the absolute gut-level certainty that he had lived this exact sequence before, like a corrupted loop stuck in his nightly route. Okay, let's jump to the next case, which brings up a whole different kind of temporal glitch. We're in Kyoto, Japan, it's 1999. A university researcher is running late, he's rushing through the morning streets, totally frustrated, and just focused on the papers in his hands. Then, out of nowhere, there's this loud pop, and for a split second, everything freezes. Even cherry blossom petals just hang in the air. Then reality kicks back in, but he's standing back at a street corner he'd passed 12 minutes earlier. The world replays itself perfectly. The same people, the same conversations, the same cyclist with a torn backpack, but the most chilling part? That comes when he finally gets to the university. His colleagues tell him he's already been there, that he arrived on time, talked to them, and even handed in his papers. His timeline hadn't just looped, it had somehow split in two. For our third fracture in the timeline, we're heading to a harbor in Reykjavik, Iceland. It's 1964, and a photographer is setting up his shot, trying to get that perfect sunset over the water. Just a quiet, focused, normal moment. So he presses the shutter, but the camera jams. Annoying, right? But what he found when he develops that film, well, it's just impossible. The roll had a perfect image from 1 minute before he even took the shot. Then a whole sequence of frames showing 9 seconds where time itself was moving backward. Waves retreating from the shore, birds flying in reverse, and finally a perfect shot from 1 minute after his camera had jammed. The film had somehow recorded the past, the future, and a moment where time itself was rewinding. All right, this last case, this one is maybe the strangest of them all. We're in Delhi, India, in 2014. A group of students is walking past what they think is just some old, abandoned colonial building. As they pass a courtyard, the world just goes weird.
First, they notice their footsteps are echoing, but not right. They're at the wrong speed. They hear the faint voice of a street vendor shouting in a dialect that hasn't been used since the 1920s. Suddenly, the wind just stops. The shadows on the ground freeze solid. The air fills with the smell of coal smoke, a smell long gone from the modern city. It was like they'd walked into a time pocket, a little bubble of the past. When things went back to normal, they checked their phones, and every single one showed a different time.
But the real kicker, the part that makes this whole thing absolutely impossible, came later. When the students looked up the location, they found out the truth. The building they had just walked through, the one that felt so real, that held a piece of the 1920s, had been completely demolished 4 years earlier. They hadn't just stepped into the past, they had walked through a ghost.
So, what are we supposed to make of all this? A bus that travels backward, a guy who lives the same 12 minutes twice, a camera that photographs the future, and a building that exists after its own destruction. Are these just a bunch of strange, unrelated freak occurrences? Or are they all pointing to the same startling conclusion about how time actually works?
This is where our source material brings it all together with a unifying theory it calls the algorithm of time. And this isn't just some philosophical idea. It's a new model for how reality might actually function, one that could explain every single one of these bizarre fractures in the timeline.
Basically, the theory says forget everything you know about time being a river. Instead, think of reality more like a massive cosmic computer file. Each moment is just a piece of data. And just like any file system, this one can glitch. Moments can get copied and pasted, data can get corrupted and cause a loop, or the whole system can just execute a rollback to a previous state. The universe isn't just moving forward, it's constantly recalculating itself.
And here's where it all just clicks into place. This one idea, it kind of explains everything. The bus driver in Marseille, he got caught in a corrupted data loop. The researcher in Kyoto, that was a full system rollback. Those impossible photos from Iceland, the system loaded a file out of sequence. And the students in Delhi, they stumbled into a cached memory fragment, an old piece of data that just hadn't been fully erased yet.
So that brings us to the big one, the ultimate implication of this whole idea. If time isn't a river we're traveling on, but a system that is constantly being written and rewritten, then what does that say about us, about our place in it all? The implication is, well, it's both humbling and kind of awe-inspiring. I mean, really let that sink in for a second. We aren't passengers on a journey. We are the screens on which the code of reality is being displayed. We are the conduits that the algorithm of time flows through, calculates, and yeah, sometimes glitches through. Our consciousness is just the experience of that calculation happening moment by moment. So, where does that leave us? With one final, haunting question. If this model is even remotely true, if our reality is more like an editable script than a fixed arrow, does that mean the script is already written? And if it is, are these glitches, these fractures in the timeline, just accidental glimpses of the pages yet to come? What do you think?